Welcome back, curious minds, to another thought-provoking episode of AI History of Western Philosophy. Today, we're embarking on a truly ancient journey, winding our way back to the early 5th century BCE. We're looking at one of the most enigmatic and, frankly, mind-bending figures in ancient Greek thought, Parmenides of Elea.
Indeed, Parmenides presents what's often been called an enduring and profound challenge in philosophy. His poem, or the fragments we have of it, where this mysterious goddess serves as our guide. Well, it lays out a truly monumental puzzle. It's captivated and, honestly, confounded scholars for millennia. A foundational riddle, really, right at the origins of Western metaphysics.
And when I say stumped philosophers, I mean stumped. We're talking about the stark, seemingly irreconcilable opposition between two major sections of his work. You've got the way of truth, or aletheia, and then the way of seeming, the doxa. And at first glance, these two paths, they just seem to describe completely different realities, contradictory even. It creates this deep interpretive chasm.
That really is the crux of the problem. Traditionally, scholars have found it incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, to bridge that chasm. The way of seeming, the doxa, it's often just been dismissed, called mere illusion or maybe a catalog of mortal errors, a kind of concession to how our senses fool us. I mean, the goddess herself introduces the doxa by calling it a deceptive order where there's no true trust. So naturally, that leads many to question its purpose, its ontological status. If it's all just deception, why did Parmenides even bother writing about it in such detail?
Exactly. It feels like a philosophical bait and switch, doesn't it? You get this profound truth then. This deceptive stuff you also need to learn. So what's our mission for this episode of AI History of Western Philosophy? What new insights are we bringing to this ancient dilemma, especially using modern tools?
Well, our mission today is to explore a novel solution. And frankly, I think it's a deeply satisfying one. We're going to argue that this chasm between the aletheia and the doxa, it can be coherently bridged, but not by seeing it as negation, like one is true and the other totally false, or even just epistemic failure, like, oh, mortals just get it wrong. Instead, we'll reconceptualize their relationship as one of metaphysical grounding. This model suggests the phenomenal world, the world of appearance, isn't an illusion to be just waved away. It's a derivative, yes, but still real stratum of existence. And it's ontologically grounded in the fundamental being described in the way of truth.
Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating. We're going to apply these sophisticated tools from contemporary analytic metaphysics, you mentioned metaphysical grounding, and also higher order logic, applying these to one of philosophy's oldest, most foundational problems. So what does this actually mean for understanding Parmenides?
It means we're looking at the world of appearance, the doxa, as derivative, sure, but real. Its existence, its character, it's all constitutively explained by and depends on that fundamental being from the way of truth. The many, in essence, depend on the one.
Ah, okay, so it's a hierarchy.
Exactly. This synthesis lets us use modern ontology to look at this ancient issue, arguing that Parmenides' two ways actually describe a single, unified reality, just structured by this profound ontological priority.
All right, let's begin by truly unpacking the heart of Parmenides' argument, the way of truth, the aletheia. This is where the goddess reveals this vision of true reality, the fundamental what is to Eon. How does she do it? What's her method here?
It's quite radical for its time, really. She unveils it, but not through empirical observation, not by looking around at the world using our senses. No, instead, it's revealed through this rigorous, purely deductive, a priori argument. She calls it following the unwavering heart of persuasive truth. The subject is what is, and its nature comes out through logical inferences, and it's all based on this single foundational principle. It is, and it is not possible for it not to be.
It is, and it is not possible for it not to be. That's the bedrock.
That's the bedrock. And she sternly warns, this path strictly forbids any trafficking with what is not. That concept is declared utterly unsayable, unthinkable. Any attempt to even conceive of non-being, of what is not, is just an incoherent project, like trying to think about, well, nothing, which you can't do.
So from this single, almost startlingly simple premise that it is and cannot not be, what striking attributes does Parmenides then deduce for this fundamental reality? What does what is turn out to be like? It feels like pulling a rabbit out of a hat, almost.
It kind of does. But the logic is tight. From that one premise, the goddess rigorously deduces several quite astonishing attributes. We find them mostly in the long fragment 8. First, being is ungenerated and imperishable. It's eternal.
Eternal.
It can't have come into being, because that would mean coming from what is not, which is impossible, right?
Right. Forbidden.
And likewise, it can't perish, because that would mean becoming what is not. Also impossible. The goddess says it neither was nor will be, since it is now altogether one continuous.
Wow, is now all together. So not just existing forever, but existing outside of time in a way.
Exactly, and a temporal, eternal nature. This idea was hugely influential later on, for philosophical and theological ideas about divine eternity,
Yeah.
a real break from myths where gods were born and died.
Okay, so timeless, eternal. What's the next attribute?
Next, being is deduced as whole, continuous, and indivisible. It's described as a unified plenum, whole of a single kind, all alike, because, as she says, it's all replete with what is.
A plenum, like completely full, no gaps.
Precisely. The logic is compelling. Any division within being would require something other than being to separate its parts. A void, a gap, some kind of not being. But since what is not is impossible.
Then being must be perfectly continuous, indivisible, a seamless whole.
You got it, a seamless unity. And this, by the way, was a direct shot at the Pythagoreans, who thought reality was made of units separated by void. Parmenides just says, nope, no void.
That makes logical sense following the premise. Okay, unbroken fabric of existence. But what about change, motion? Everything seems to move.
Well, according to the Aletheia, being is motionless and unchanging. The goddess says it's unmoved within the limits of great bonds, held fast by powerful necessity.
Held fast.
Yeah. Any change or motion would imply that being was not something before or will not be something later, which, again, smuggles in that forbidden concept of not being.
It always comes back to that not being impossible.
Always. So generation and destruction, the ultimate changes, are driven far away by true conviction, its absolute immutability for fundamental reality. A huge challenge, obviously, to someone like Heraclitus with his everything flows.
A complete contrast. Okay, so eternal, whole, indivisible, unchanging, and there was one more.
Yes, finally, it is perfect and complete. Being is fully actualized. It lacks nothing. It's described as perfected from every side like the bulk of a well-rounded globe.
The sphere metaphor, is that literal?
No, not a literal physical shape. It's a powerful metaphor for its absolute perfection, its completeness, its uniformity from every perspective. It's not unfulfilled, because if it lacked anything, the goddess argues it would lack everything. It's totally self-sufficient.
Wow, that's quite a picture. But what's truly astonishing, maybe the most radical part, is that line, for it is the same thing that can be thought and that can be. It sounds almost like subjective idealism, you know? If I can think it, it's real. Is that what he's saying?
That's a really crucial point to clarify. And yeah, it's often misunderstood. This isn't some crude subjective idealism like wishful thinking makes things real. It's more like a deep metaphysical principle of intelligibility.
Intelligibility.
Yeah, the idea that the fundamental structure of reality must conform to the logical constraints of coherent thought. What is genuinely thinkable meaning, conceivable without contradiction, that is, being. Conversely, trying to think what is not just fails. It's an incoherent project because you're literally trying to think about nothing, which is impossible.
Ah, I see. So thought and reality must align at the most fundamental level because incoherent thoughts don't correspond to anything possible.
Exactly. The Aletheia establishes this vision of fundamental reality as a single, perfect, eternal, intelligible unity. The rules of logic mirror the rules of reality itself.
Okay, so after this really austere, purely logical deduction of being, the goddess takes this surprisingly sharp turn. She announces, "At this point, I stop for you my trustworthy account and thought concerning truth. From here on, learn the opinions of mortals, listening to the deceptive order of my words." That marks the beginning of the doxa, the way of seeming. Well, it's jarring, isn't it? What does she present here? Does she just throw out all that logic?
It's absolutely jarring, and that's precisely what's baffled scholars for centuries. But no, she doesn't just abandon her arguments. What she does is present a comprehensive physical cosmology, a world that looks quite familiar to our senses. It's a world teeming with plurality, motion, generation, destruction, all the stuff the way of truth seemed to deny.
The opposite, really.
Pretty much. And it's built, she says, on a foundational dualism. Mortals, she explains, have erred by naming two fundamental forms as the basic principles, light and night. She describes them with opposing characteristics. Light is gentle, very light, while night is dense and heavy.
And from this mixture of light and night, the entire phenomenal cosmos gets generated. The heavens, sun, moon, stars, living creatures, everything we actually see and touch. It sounds like a full-blown scientific theory for its time.
Precisely. It actually contains what seem like remarkably sophisticated scientific ideas for the era, like the claim that the moon gets its light from the sun. Later writers attributed that insight to Parmenides. But the central puzzle, as you said, is the nature of its deception.
Right.
The goddess's warnings are severe. She calls mortal opinions a deceptive arrangement, says there's no true trust in them. Yet, paradoxically, she insists this account must be learned. She even says something like, no judgment of mortals shall ever surpass the listener if they truly grasp this way.
Right. Why learn it in such detail if it's fundamentally deceptive? That's the core of the problem.
It really is. And it's the heart of the interpretive challenge we've been talking about.
So let's get to the bottom of it then. Is this cosmology totally false? If it is, why present it so meticulously? What exactly is the fundamental error of mortals that makes this world deceptive in Parmenides' view?
Okay, this is where the reinterpretation we're proposing really starts to pay off. The core mistake, we argue, isn't simply that mortals trust their senses and see plurality or change. Our senses, within their own domain, might be quite accurate reporters of what's going on.
So it's not about faulty senses.
Not primarily. The problem is that their entire conceptual scheme is flawed. The goddess describes them wandering two-headed, deaf and blind at once, bedazzled, undiscriminating hordes. Strong language.
Very strong.
Their fundamental error, the deep metaphysical misstep, is believing that to be and not to be are deemed the same and not the same.
Ah, that mixing of being and non-being again.
Exactly. By positing light and night as fundamental principles, they treat opposites as primary realities. In doing that, they implicitly accept that something can be not light or not night. They're trafficking in negation and not being the very thing the way of truth absolutely forbids.
So they build their whole worldview on a logical contradiction, according to Parmenides.
Precisely. Their path is backwards turning because it fails to grasp the one-way street from being. It muddles being and non-being. This creates a world of contingency, change, opposition, which, from the perspective of pure reason established in the aletheia, cannot be an object of stable, unwavering knowledge. It's not that the things in the doxa don't exist, it's that the framework mortals use to understand them is fundamentally mistaken because it's built on accepting what is not as somehow real or explanatory.
This stark, almost brutal contrast, the one, static being of the aletheia versus the changing plural world of the doxa. It's no wonder it's given rise to centuries of intense scholarly debate. Philosophers have been grappling with this apparent contradiction for millennia. What are the main schools of thought that have tried to resolve this, and where have they typically, fallen short, leaving that chasm still pretty wide?
Yeah, there have been several major approaches over the centuries, each trying to bridge this gap. Each has its strengths, but also, for our purposes, significant limitations. First, you have strict monism, sometimes called numerical monism.
Numerical monism, okay.
This view takes Parmenides' arguments in the aletheia absolutely literally.
Right.
Only one undifferentiated, unchanging being exists, period. Consequently, the world of ordinary experience with all its plurality, motion, change is just a complete illusion. It's simply non-existent.
Wow, okay. That's a strong claim. What's the issue there?
Well, while it certainly respects the logical force of the way of truth, it struggles badly to explain the purpose of the doxa. If everything we perceive is just an illusion, utterly unreal, why would Parmenides dedicate a huge chunk of his poem, a serious philosophical effort, to describing this elaborate, supposedly unreal cosmology? It leaves a big, puzzling part of the text just hanging there, unexplained.
Yeah, that is a major criticism. If it's all illusion, why bother detailing it so carefully, it seems? Pointless, almost. What about interpretations that try to connect the two ways more genuinely? Give the doxa some reality.
Right. Then you get interpretations like a spectralism, or sometimes it's called the two worlds interpretation. This has ancient roots. You find hints of it in Plato and Aristotle. The idea is that the two ways describe different aspects of a single reality.
Aspects.
Yeah.
Like intelligible versus sensible.
It's exactly. Maybe an intelligible, unchanging aspect versus a sensible, changing aspect. Or even two distinct realms, like Plato's forms versus the world of particulars. Now, this is definitely a step towards a hierarchical view. It acknowledges both parts of the poem have some role. But it often lacks a precise metaphysical mechanism to explain the actual connection. How exactly does the sensible realm relate to the intelligible one? What is that bridge, that participation that Plato himself wrestled with? It often ends up being more of a descriptive label than a real explanation.
So it posits two sides, but doesn't really explain the how or why they connect or how one might derive from the other. Like saying a tree has roots and leaves, but not explaining how the roots feed the leaves. Got it. What else?
Then there's the modal interpretation. This offers a more nuanced view. It argues the aletheia describes necessary being what must be, can't be otherwise, while the doxa describes contingent being what is, but didn't have to be. It could have been different.
Necessary versus contingent. Okay.
On this view, the phenomenal world is real, but it's contingent. And because it's contingent, it can't be an object of stable, infallible knowledge like the necessary being can. Now, this interpretation does a pretty good job capturing the epistemic side of the goddess's warnings, no true trust in the doxa. If it's contingent, our knowledge of it is less certain.
Makes sense.
But it still needs a clearer account of the underlying ontological relationship. How does contingent being actually depend on necessary being? Is it just a logical relation or something deeper, more structural?
Still missing that precise link. Okay, and there was one more main approach.
Yeah, predicational monism. This suggests that each real thing can only have one essential property, but crucially, it allows for many such things to exist. The doxa is then interpreted not as illusory or contingent, but as a world of plural entities that are simply wrongly described by mortals.
So the error is in our language, our descriptions.
Kind of. The error is in our predications about reality, rather than the reality itself being illusory. But this still doesn't fully resolve that fundamental ontological gap between the unified being, or maybe many simple beings, and the complex world of the doxa. And it doesn't fully explain the goddess's really strong language about deception and backwards turning paths. Feels a bit like a linguistic fix, maybe, not a deep metaphysical one.
So it seems like while all these interpretations offer valuable perspectives, they all kind of hit an impasse. They struggle, especially with the ontological status of the phenomenal world and the precise nature of its relationship to the one true being. They don't give us that satisfying how or why the doxa exists in relation to the aletheia, or why it's worth studying if it's so flawed.
Exactly. And to move beyond this impasse, we believe a fundamental shift in how we understand Parmenidean monism itself is required. The very possibility of the grounding-based model we're proposing hinges on this shift. Because think about it. Metaphysical grounding, our main tool here, is a dependence relation. It holds between something more fundamental to ground and something distinct, less fundamental to grounded.
Okay.
For grounding to even apply, you need at least two ontological levels, a fundamental level and a derivative level. Numerical monism, the strict view, it just collapses this structure by definition. If only one single thing exists, there's literally nothing else to be grounded. The phenomenal world would just be non-existent. Poof. The inquiry ends there, with no real explanation for the doxa needed.
So what's the crucial reinterpretation we need to make then? The one that allows for this hierarchy, the structure our model requires?
Instead of viewing Parmenides as a numerical monist, meaning only one single thing exists, we interpret him as a priority monist.
Priority monist. Okay.
This is the essential first step. It's the conceptual key, really, that unlocks the whole puzzle for us.
Okay, let's unpack this properly. What is the difference between numerical monism and priority monism? Why is this distinction so absolutely vital for understanding Parmenides and for the model we're building here?
Right. Numerical monism, as we said, asserts there's only one undifferentiated thing, full stop. If that's true, any appearance of plurality or change is just illusion, and there's nothing real for the way of seeming to describe. It flattens reality completely. Priority monism, however, is different. It's the doctrine that there is exactly one fundamental or basic entity.
Okay, one fundamental thing.
While crucially allowing for the existence of a plurality of derivative entities. Things that depend on that one fundamental being. Think of it like maybe a single substance that underlies everything, or maybe the universe as a whole being the fundamental thing, with all the parts depending on the whole. The key is one fundamental thing, many dependent things.
Okay. So the whole is ontologically prior to its parts, maybe. And those parts, the changing world of our experience, they're conceived as dependent aspects or fragments of the one. This provides the necessary ontological architecture. The structure we need to explain the doxa is something real, but secondary, dependent.
Precisely. It gives us exactly what we need. A single fundamental ground, that's the being of the aletheia, and a plurality of derivative entities. Those are the constituents of the doxa. This radically shifts the central question. We're no longer asking, does the world of the senses exist at all? Instead, we ask the much more productive question. What is the ontological status of the world of the senses, and how does it relate to fundamental reality?
It reframes the whole project.
Completely. It reframes Parmenides' aim not as denying our experience, but as this radical inquiry into what is ontologically prior or fundamental. The aletheia becomes the investigation into the nature of this one basic thing, and the doxa becomes the account of the derivative things that depend on it. This distinction, this priority monism interpretation, is truly the linchpin for our whole model.
Okay, so to build this rigorous model of Parmenidean metaphysics, we need these modern conceptual tools. Let's start with metaphysical grounding. It's a concept that's gained a lot of traction in contemporary philosophy lately. What is it really at its heart? And why is it so essential for understanding Parmenides' universe in this new light?
Right, metaphysical grounding. It's really emerged in the last few decades as a central concept for talking about the structure of reality, especially these hierarchical structures of dependence we've been mentioning. It's generally understood as a primitive relation, meaning it's not definable in simpler terms, it's non-causal, importantly, and it's an explanatory relation of ontological dependence.
Okay, primitive, non-causal explanatory dependence.
Yeah, we often express it using phrases like in virtue of, or because, or is grounded in. It
Hmm.
basically sets up a hierarchy of fundamentality, what's more basic and what depends on what.
Can you give us a quick, tangible example just to make it really concrete for everyone listening?
Sure. Think about a bronze statue. The fact that the statue exists is grounded in the facts about the arrangement of its constituent bronze molecules.
Okay.
The statue's existence isn't caused by the bronze being arranged that way. Rather, the arrangement of the bronze constitutes or grounds the existence of the statue itself.
Okay.
Maybe a moral example. The fact that, say, kicking a dog is wrong might be grounded in the fact that it causes unnecessary suffering. The wrongness isn't some separate thing floating around. It depends on, it exists in virtue of, the suffering caused.
Got it. So it's not cause and effect over time, but more like what something is made of or consists in at a deeper metaphysical level. What are its key properties? What makes it suitable for explaining this kind of hierarchy we're positing for Parmenides?
Well, the standard view, the orthodox view, ascribes to grounding the properties of what mathematicians call a strict partial order.
A strict partial order, meaning
Meaning it has three key features. First, irreflexivity. Nothing grounds itself. A fact or entity can't be its own fundamental explanation. Grounding chains always have a direction. They don't loop back, ensuring a clear order of dependence.
okay, no self-grounding.
Second, asymmetry. If A grounds B, then B does not ground A. This establishes a clear one-way direction of priority. It always flows from the more fundamental to the less fundamental.
Makes sense. Fundamentality is directional.
And third, transitivity. If A grounds B and B grounds C, then A also grounds C. This property ensures that grounding relations form coherent chains of dependence. Explanations can trace all the way back, step by step, to ultimate ungrounded grounds.
And for Parmenides, that ultimate ground would be his fundamental being, the eu to eon.
Precisely. That's the idea.
So it's really crucial then to distinguish grounding from other relations, isn't it? It's not simply causation, even though both seem to involve explanation. Can you elaborate on that distinction a bit more? It seems important.
It's absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, that's often misunderstood. Causation is typically thought of as a diachronic relation. It unfolds over time. It happens between distinct events, like striking a match, causing it to light a moment later. Grounding, by contrast, is synchronic and constitutive. It holds at the same time. The arrangement of atoms doesn't cause the table to exist later. They constitute the table right now. It's about what something is in a deep metaphysical sense, not what brings it about in a temporal sequence.
Okay, synchronic, constitutive, not diachronic, causal.
Right. And furthermore, grounding is thought to be more fine-grained than just logical entailment or modal supervenience. Think about this. 2 plus 2, 4 is necessarily true. 3 plus 3 is 6 is also necessarily true. They always go together. But does 2 plus 2 be 4 ground 3 plus 3 is 6 or vice versa? Most would say no.
Right, they seem independent truths.
Exactly. Grounding captures a directed explanatory priority that mere necessity or logical implication alone can't. It tells you the why in a deeper, more structured sense. It's about what makes something the case, metaphysically speaking.
So it's really about underwriting this hierarchical picture of reality. Fundamental stuff at the bottom, everything else derivative, explained by chains of grounding leading back to that base. This sounds absolutely perfect for Parmenides' one and many. It gives us that precise in virtue of connection we were missing in those older interpretations.
Now, to formalize this grounding model with enough precision, we need something more powerful than standard first-order logic. That's where higher-order logic, or HOL, comes in. Think about it like this. First-order logic is great for talking about individual things. You know, Socrates is a man. All men are mortal. It lets us quantify over individuals. But in metaphysics, we often need to talk about properties themselves or relations themselves or even entire propositions. Statements like some properties are rare or every truth is grounded in reality.
Right, we talk about properties, not just using them to describe things.
Exactly. Standard first-order logic just doesn't have the expressive power for that kind of talk. It can't really handle the complex architecture of reality we need to describe.
So if we want to talk formally about the intrinsic properties of Parmenides' fundamental being, or the complex relations between things in the doxa, and especially the grounding relation itself that connects them, we need a richer language. What are the key features of higher-order logic that make it so indispensable here?
Okay, there are three main features of HOL that are really valuable for this project. First, HOL is built on a sophisticated type theory.
Type theory.
Yeah, imagine it like a strict grammar for reality or for our language about reality. Every expression gets assigned a logical type. This prevents paradoxes and ensures logical coherence. So an individual, like Parmenides being, might be type E for entity. A property of that individual, like is eternal or is unified, would be a higher type, maybe E, a function that takes an entity and gives back a truth value, T, true or false.
So it keeps everything organized, logically speaking, prevents us mixing up individuals with properties, for example.
Precisely. It enforces clarity and rigor, making sure we're always comparing apples to apples, philosophically speaking.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the next critical feature?
The second, and maybe the defining feature, is higher order quantification. This is the ability to quantify not just over individuals, all men, but over variables of these higher types, over properties, relations, propositions. So we can formally say things like, for all properties X, or there exists some relation R such that.
So we can make general claims about properties and relations themselves.
Exactly, and this lets us formalize complex metaphysical principles without having to commit to a bloated ontology where every single property relation has to be treated as some separate abstract object floating out there in Plato's heaven, so to speak.
Right.
For a philosopher like Parmenides, who's all about that single unified being, this ontological parsimony is a huge advantage. We can talk about the properties of being, its wholeness, its immutability, without having to say those properties are somehow separate entities from the being itself. It keeps the unity while allowing complexity in description.
That's a crucial point, especially for Parmenides. It lets us have complexity without multiplying fundamental entities. Okay, and the third feature.
Thirdly, HOL typically includes something called the lambda abstraction operator, often written with the Greek letter lambda. This basically lets us form complex predicates, complex property descriptions, directly from simpler logical formulas. For example, if you have a formula like x is hot, any dx is heavy, describing some individual x, the lambda operator lets you form a new predicate, x is hot, and x is heavy. This new thing denotes the property of being both hot and heavy.
So it's like a tool for building complex properties on the fly within the logic itself.
Exactly. It's a really powerful and systematic way to handle complex properties and relations directly within the logical language. Super useful for capturing the intricate details we might find in the doxa.
Okay, so pulling it all together. Using higher order logic, we can talk about the intrinsic properties of the one being, the complex structure of the phenomenal world, doxa, and the precise nature of the grounding relation connecting them, all within a single, coherent, formal language. A language that respects Parmenides' focus on unity while still letting us describe the rich complexity of appearances. This really is bringing ancient philosophy into the 21st century, giving it the precision maybe it needed all along. Okay, with our conceptual tools now sharpened, priority monism, metaphysical grounding, and higher order logic, let's finally put the model together. The foundational move, as we hammered home, is interpreting Parmenides not as a numerical monist, but as a priority monist. How exactly do we articulate this formally now, using our new framework?
Right. We can articulate priority monism quite precisely now. We can use a predicate, let's say BX, to stand for X is a basic concrete object, or X is fundamental. Priority monism then gets formalized essentially as there exists exactly one thing, X such that the BX is true, formally something like X and BX.
Okay, so there exists something, X, which is basic, and for anything else, Y, if it's basic, then it's just identical to X. There's only one basic thing.
Exactly. Just one basic concrete object. And that single basic object, X, is what we identify with the being, the tau eon, described in the aletheia. It's the ungrounded ground, the ultimate source.
And that single basic object is the one with all those properties the goddess described: ungenerated, imperishable, whole, continuous, motionless, unchanging, perfect, complete.
That's the one. This being, B, is the fundamental ground of all reality in our model. And the crucial point here, again, isn't denying the existence of other things, it's denying their fundamentality. All those manifold entities and phenomena of the doxa, the sun, moon, fire, earth, change, plurality, they get recategorized. They're real, but they are ontologically derivative entities.
They depend on
B. This reinterpretation reframes Parmenides' whole project. His main goal wasn't to deny the world we see, but to ask, what is ontologically prior? What's fundamental? The Aletheia investigates the nature of this one basic entity, B, and the Doxa gives an account of the derivative entities that depend upon it. It gives both parts a clear, integrated purpose.
Now for the central thesis of our model. This is the moment of synthesis, right, where we articulate how the two ways actually connect, how the doxa really hangs off the aletheia, how do we use that metaphysical grounding relation to formally express this dependence.
This is indeed the core of the proposal.
Yeah.
So, we have our components clearly defined now. We have B, the one fundamental being of the aletheia. We can treat it as an individual constant in our logic. And then we have D. Let's think of D as the collective set, or maybe the plurality, of all facts or propositions that constitute the phenomenal world described in the doxa. All its features, its plurality, its changes. And our connecting tissue is the metaphysical grounding relation itself, which we can symbolize as G. Since D is a collection of facts, we might need a higher order grounding relation like G, X, Y, meaning entity X grounds the plurality of facts Y.
Okay, so B is the one being, D is the collection of facts making up the many phenomenal world, and G is grounding. So the core claim, the big idea that finally bridges that chasm, it's simply GBD. The one fundamental being, B, grounds the entire collection of facts, D, that make up the phenomenal world of the doxa. It's almost elegant in its simplicity.
It really is. That single conceptual claim, GBD, establishes the hierarchical and explanatory relationship we need. It positions the doxa, D, not as some falsehood to be rejected, but as a derivative reality whose existence and character are explained by and fundamentally depend on the fundamental being, B. This radically shifts our whole understanding of Parmenides' work. It moves from looking like a frustrating contradiction to being a coherent, unified metaphysical system. It provides that missing in virtue of link.
Okay, but this immediately brings up the massive question, the one that's been the biggest hurdle for traditional interpretations for, well, millennia. How can Parmenides' utterly unchanging, perfectly unified being possibly ground a world, D, that is so obviously full of plurality, motion, and constant change? That seems like the ultimate paradox. How does the model handle that?
This is precisely where the power of our model, rooted in priority monism and using metaphysical grounding, allows for a coherent explanation, where older models struggled. Let's tackle from unity to plurality first.
Okay. How does the one ground the many?
The absolute indivisibility and unity of being B doesn't actually prevent it from grounding a plurality of derivative facts or appearances. D. Think about maybe a complex object in physics, like a single quantum field. From this one fundamental entity, a vast plurality of different particles and forces might arise or emerge, yet they are all grounded in that single unified field.
Ah, okay. Like different ripples on the surface of one pond.
Sort of, yeah. Similarly, the plural phenomena described in the doxa, making up D, are grounded in the one being, B. The unity is preserved at the fundamental level, B is one, while multiplicity arises and is explained at the derivative level, D contains many facts. The plurality isn't fundamental, but it's real because it's grounded in the one.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. The experience plurality is real, but it's not fundamentally plural in the way B is fundamentally one. It's like a complex chord emerging from vibrating a single string. What about the other big one? From timelessness to change. How does an eternal, unchanging being ground a world full of generation, destruction, constant motion? This really feels like a logical leap.
This is where we can draw on a concept from modern philosophy of time, known as eternalism.
Eternalism, the block universe idea.
Exactly. Sometimes playfully called the block universe view.
Yeah.
Eternalism holds that all times, past, present, future, are equally real. From a higher atemporal perspective, the entire four-dimensional manifold of space-time, with all the apparent changes and events unfolding within it, exists all at once as a single timeless whole.
So the whole history of the universe is like a single static block.
From that higher perspective, yes. Now, this entire block, with all its internal changes, its births, deaths, movements, its entire temporal unfolding, can itself be conceived as a single, complex, derivative entity. That's our D, the collection of all facts across time. Our model proposes that the existence of this entire temporal block, which contains all change and temporality, is itself grounded in the timeless, unchanging being.
Whoa, okay, so B doesn't change.
B itself does not change, but it grounds D, the whole block of space-time, which contains change within it. Change is real within the derivative block D, but the block as a whole depends on a ground, B, that is utterly changeless and eternal.
So B is the ultimate timeless basis for everything that happens in time.
Precisely. It's not changing itself, but but it's the fundamental reason why there is a reality that contains change.
What's truly fascinating here, and something I know we've touched on, is how this connects so deeply to Plato. Plato was hugely influenced by Parmenides' eternal, unchanging, intelligible reality, his forms. But he notoriously struggled with how sensible particulars, the changing things we see, could participate in these eternal forms. Could this grounding model actually be a solution to Plato's participation problem too, even though Plato came later?
You're hitting on a really profound point there. If we connect this to the bigger picture, yes. The concept of metaphysical grounding, as developed in contemporary philosophy, is designed to capture precisely this sort of non-causal constitutive dependence of a lower ontological level on a higher one. Plato famously used the term participation methexis to describe how sensible things relate to the forms. But critically, in his own dialogue named Parmenides, he subjects that very notion of participation to a devastating critique, showing how simplistic models of it just don't work.
Right, the third man argument and all that.
Exactly. So the grounding relation we're using here, GBD, where the one being grounds the phenomenal world, can plausibly be understood as a formal, rigorous articulation of the very participation relation that Plato was searching for, but struggled to clearly define. In our model, the phenomenal world of the doxa D participates in the true being of the aletheia B precisely by being metaphysically grounded in it. So yes, this potentially offers a plausible formal reconstruction, not only for the Parmenidean puzzle, but also for a core, unresolved problem in Platonic metaphysics. It shows the incredible power of these modern tools to maybe shed new light even on problems Plato wrestled with.
Okay, so with this grounding model firmly in place, we can now revisit one of the most puzzling bits of Parmenides' poem. The goddess's really severe warnings about the doxa being deceptive and mortals being deaf and blind, wandering on a backwards turning path. If the phenomenal world D is now understood as a real, albeit derivative stratum of existence grounded in B, is she still saying our senses are fundamentally lying to us? Does this mean we should just stop trusting our eyes and ears?
This is a crucial reinterpretation that our grounding model allows for, and I think it makes much better sense of the text. The deception is not primarily perceptual or epistemic.
Not perceptual, so our senses aren't the problem.
Not fundamentally. The deception is primarily metaphysical. If the phenomenal world of the doxa D is a real derivative stratum, then our senses aren't reporting falsehoods when they show us plurality and change. Your senses accurately perceive a world of plurality, change, opposition, because that is precisely what the derivative realm D is actually like. When you see a tree grow or a cloud move or hear multiple sounds, your senses are giving you accurate information about D.
Ah, so the error isn't in seeing the world as plural and changing. The error isn't the sensory input itself. It's in what we assume about that world's fundamental nature. The problem isn't the data, but our philosophical interpretation of it.
Precisely. That's exactly it. The error of mortals, the reason they are two-headed and undiscriminating, is not that they perceive this dynamic, multifaceted world. D. Their profound mistake, the metaphysical misstep, is that they mistake this derivative world, D, for fundamental reality. B. They take the grounded for the ground.
They mistake the effect for the ultimate cause, metaphysically speaking.
Yes, that's what the goddess means by the backwards turning path. It completely inverts the true order of metaphysical priority. Mortals try to explain reality bottom up, starting from appearances and trying to derive fundamental truths from them, instead of understanding that appearances, D, are ultimately explained top down from the fundamental being, B. They fail to grasp the ontological dependence, the grounding relation, the true structure of how reality hangs together.
And the deception itself, then? Maybe it lies in the fact that our senses can only ever present us with the grounded phenomena. They simply can't perceive the underlying grounding relations themselves or the ground B directly. We see the derived world, but not its ultimate foundation or the connection. Is that a fair way to put it?
That's a perfect way to put it. The uncritical mind, presented with the vivid, compelling world of the doxa D, perceives only that surface level of reality. It then makes a profound metaphysical category mistake by assigning fundamental status to something that is, in fact, derivative and dependent. This interpretation gives a precise and powerful meaning to the goddess's warnings. It explains why she calls it deceptive without forcing us to say the world we experience is unreal. It preserves the reality of the phenomenal world, D, and crucially, the veracity of sensory experience within its proper domain, the domain of reporting on D.
So the senses are reliable reporters of the derivative world.
Yes, but they simply cannot, on their own, reveal its ultimate fundamental metaphysical basis, B, or the grounding relation, G, connecting them. This solves a major, long-standing interpretive problem that has really plagued Parmenidean scholarship for 2.5 millennia.
What an incredible journey. Seriously, delving into ancient philosophy, but illuminated by this powerful lens of modern tools like grounding and HOL. This grounding model truly seems to provide a unified, coherent reading of Parmenides' entire fragmented poem. It feels like it finally resolves that nagging contradiction that's haunted philosophy for so long.
It really does feel that way. It offers a way to see the poem not as contradictory, but as presenting two essential parts of a single structured metaphysics.
Hmm.
Crucially, it explains why the goddess insists that the man of understanding must learn all things, Panta, not just the unwavering heart of truth about B, but also the opinions of mortals about Dia.
Right. Why learn the opinions if they're just wrong?
Because a complete metaphysical understanding, Parmenides seems to imply, requires knowing not only the fundamental ground, but also the derivative reality, D, and most importantly, the grounding relation, G, that connects them. The doxa isn't just an appendix of falsehoods to be thrown out. It's an essential part of the total picture. It's the description of what is grounded. To ignore it would be to have an incomplete understanding of being's full reality and its consequences.
And thinking back to those earlier interpretations, this also seems to vindicate those more generous readings from antiquity, doesn't it? Like Aristotle's and Plato's aspectual views. It feels like it finally gives them that precise in virtue of connection that they sensed was there but couldn't quite articulate.
Yes, I think it does. Our model can be seen as a formal vindication, or at least a precise articulation, of those generous interpretations. The aspectual view, which saw the two ways as maybe accounts of the intelligible B and the sensible D, is given a specific mechanism. The sensible D is metaphysically grounded in the intelligible B. Our model supplies that in virtue of connection GBD that was missing, providing a robust philosophical foundation for their insightful intuitions.
And finally, it really justifies why Parmenides included such a detailed cosmology in the doxa. It's not just a random collection of contemporary scientific ideas or a historical footnote.
Exactly. It can be read as Parmenides' attempt to provide the best possible scientific account of the derivative realm, to show how the world of appearances is structured, how light and night interact to produce the cosmos we see. He does this even while consistently maintaining that its ultimate ontological explanation lies solely in the one fundamental being, B, of the aletheia. The doxa is the detailed account of the grounded reality, a necessary component of complete metaphysics. Without it, the picture would be incomplete, just the foundation, without the building that rests upon it.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for us, the learners tuning into AI history of Western philosophy? Beyond understanding Parmenides better, what's the bigger takeaway from this deep dive into ancient metaphysics using modern logic?
Well, I think first it demonstrates the profound and continuing relevance of Parmenides' thought, even after 2,500 years. His fundamental questions about being and non-being, unity and plurality, change and permanence, these are still absolutely central questions driving contemporary metaphysics. He set the agenda in many ways. Second, it powerfully showcases the fruitfulness of a particular methodology. Bridging the historical exegetical approach, understanding ancient texts carefully in their own context, with a formal analytic approach, using rigorous modern conceptual tools. By bringing the most advanced tools of our time to bear on one of the most ancient and foundational philosophical problems, we can genuinely illuminate puzzles that have persisted for millennia. We can reveal new depths, perhaps, in the very origins of Western metaphysics. It really reaffirms Parmenides' status as a philosopher whose questions continue to resonate and shape the landscape today.
It truly makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often philosophical problems, even ones from thousands of years ago, can find entirely new pathways to understanding when we equip ourselves with these contemporary frameworks. It really makes you think, what other ancient puzzles, maybe from Plato or Aristotle or even earlier, are just waiting out there for the right modern metaphysical or logical framework to come along and truly unlock their secrets? Something to chew on until our next episode of AI History of Western Philosophy.